Hello, everyone. I see that people will be starting to join now. We'll give it a few seconds and then we'll get started. Hi, everyone. So today we have a discussion between Socialsuite and Tone Alone on how to measure impact, especially when it comes to well-being. So we'll first just get started with land acknowledgement. I'm joining you here today from Vancouver. So I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from the traditional, ancestral, and ceded territory of the coast / peoples, including territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tisleil, Wet'suwet'en nations. Where are you all joining us from? You can add this in the chat box. Our panelist today, Chris, is joining us today from the UK. Let's see who we have today and where you all are from. And for today's agenda, we will start with a quick introduction. We'll start with a quick introduction on Socialsuite and then on Tone Alone. And then we'll start talking a bit more about impact measurement, the impact measurement journey for Tone Alone, and then how we can leverage technology to measure impact. And afterwards, we'll start looking into visualizing this a little more. So look into Tone Alone impact measurement for their well-being, and then we'll go into Q&A. Okay, so just to start with, today I'm joining you here from Socialsuite. I'm the M&E data consultant, and Chris is joining us today from Tone Alone. He's the managing director. I'm gonna give you more introduction about Chris in a bit, but let's get started with a quick introduction about what is Socialsuite. So to simplify it, Socialsuite is all about impact measurement and simplifying impact measurements to the organizations that we work with. And so we've had the privilege to work with different organizations from all around the world, bigger and smaller organizations, including Habitat, Playgroup SA, of course, Tone Alone, Princess Trust, and so on. And the more organizations we work with, the more we started seeing that a lot of organizations are doing great in terms of looking at the outputs of their programs and services, but they still need a lot of support when it comes to actually being able to measure their outcomes and to measure their impact. And this is a huge part of the thing that we do, which is supporting organizations in really being able to show the impact of the work that they're doing, and then being actually able to prove that to their funders and to the philanthropists, because now there's a lot more pressure in terms of actually showing what is it, the change that these organizations are making. And we're really curious to know where you're currently at in terms of your impact journey. So I'll be sharing this call with you to see where you see yourself currently in the impact journey. And by the end of the session, I'll be sharing with you also an assessment that is for free, where you can just fill it out, and then we can share with you some information on how you are doing in compared to similar organizations that are doing this type of work. And thinking about what we do in terms of measuring impact, there are three main things that we help with. We help you in creating your survey questions that are built based on outcomes and indicators, so that you can know exactly how you are making this change based on the results that you're trying to achieve. And we also have already a library that is filled of impact survey questions. And then you can start collecting data through the use of Socialsuite, through URL or mobile app. And finally, you'll be able to start visualizing this in real time, so that you can see what is it, the impact that you're making, throughout working on your program. And we will be seeing some information on that, and you'll see a dashboard, a mock dashboard on the work that Tone Alone has been doing and how they are able to visualize their impact by the end of the session. So now, talking a bit more about Chris, that I'm really happy to have this conversation with his great knowledge on well-being, as well as great work that he has been doing. So today he is joining us as the founder and managing director of Tone Alone. He started it after completing his MSc in health and community and leading various project teams and consulting for national charities. Tone Alone is a UK-based nonprofit CIC that works in creating healthier communities through inclusive and person-centered well-being training programs. It's an organization that desire to make a sustainable difference in the lives of those who are less able to access mainstream services and who struggle the hardest to look after their well-being. Welcome, Chris. It's such a pleasure to have this conversation with you.
Hello. Yes, thank you for having me here.
So, Chris, today, as I mentioned earlier, I would love to learn more from you on your impact journey, mostly because you've been doing great work in terms of that, and also because you're doing work on well-being, which is really hard to measure. So I'm sure a lot of organizations could relate to some of the challenges that you might have faced, and would love to learn more about how you were able to overcome these challenges, how you are able to measure your impact. Really interested in learning more about all that, and very excited for this discussion. And to start with, I wanted to learn a little more about your thoughts in terms of why you thought impact measurement is important. What are the challenges that you saw in terms of trying to measure your impact on well-being, as well as the opportunities?
Excellent. So my background comes from the third sector in the UK quite heavily. One of my first jobs after my undergraduate was to work in the care sector. And then after my postgraduate, I worked for a number of different organizations too. And in doing that, we learned about monitoring evaluation. It was quite a young thing in terms of what we were trying to implement in many of those organizations. Some organizations were doing really well. The ones I worked for were just coming on board. So I was fortunate to benefit from a lot of training and education around that. And as a lot of third sectors know, their funding is determined often by the outcomes that they can stress, how well they're doing, and again, put that evidence of need forward as much as the remedy that they suggest. So when it came to our impact measurements, when Tone Alone was formed as a social enterprise and a community interest company, this is at the forefront of what we needed. And again, thinking about this, how can you prove a wellbeing initiative is worth its weight in gold unless you can measure those outcomes? How do you know what you're doing is actually creating any difference unless you're actually measuring what the start point of those beneficiaries were and what that transition, what that theory of change converted into real time? So that's my background. This is where we came from in terms of implementation of that. We initially started off with other platforms. We started off with platforms like SurveyMonkey, quite generalistic platforms. And we found that the data capture was great, but also it wouldn't count those people who didn't respond. We didn't know why people weren't responding, or if people dropped out of programs, why that was. We didn't have the benefit to monitor attendance through platforms like them. So in doing so, there were multiple spreadsheets going on at once and not one single CRM in which we could suggest everything to the funder or the people we work with. We can also track registration, and that was really, really important to us. So as we grew and as we scaled, it was really important that we took on a platform that could work with us to do that. So starting from the challenge at the basic was very much, okay, how do we data capture this? Is it through lots of papers? Is it forms? Is it putting out things like that? If you don't have a final contact with a beneficiary, how can you capture that data? Did it have to be done through email, a SurveyMonkey link? How is it even followed up with as well? Does it take a lot of manpower, man data? So that's a lot of challenges from us in that start point there. So therefore, one of the great ways in which we could strengthen that is through our CRM, which would take on that full capacity and then do it at scale. we're fortunate to work with a lot of public sector organisations too. The UK's second largest employer is one of them. And in doing so, we need to have robust systems that can take that on at scale. So this is where we come from a Socialsuite and working with you, Hadil, from that perspective. But in terms of the challenges going through, there are still challenges now, but we soon learn from them. And I think that learning pattern is so important. And that's where the opportunities come. Learning why program didn't work so well here, or why that data capture was so slow, why the endpoint wasn't there. And then what can we do that's going to create a more sticky process? So how can we really help that engagement? When we talk to a lot of our private sector companies we work with too, the engagement's quite a huge thing. So understanding from an M&E point of view why people drop out of something helps us also enhance our engagement and therefore become more of an attractive organization to work with in that regard.
Yeah, thank you for this great summary. And I was also wondering, in terms of building your outcome framework and actually the theoretical part, and mainly, let's say, the base in order for you to start measuring your impact, did you see this as challenging? Did you feel like you needed to hire different people that would be working on this specifically? How was your journey in terms of that?
So the journey, again, took some strain. We're quite a small organization, so a lot of the responsibility for M&E starts and finishes with me. We also have a team that does other qualitative work, such as case studies and writing around that, and they can support this process. And there was a lot of education around the training team as well to make sure that, like I said, create those sticky points. Once people exit a project, why do they fill out that survey? Why don't they survey? How can we make sure that we can increase that likelihood of actually attending and making sure that they're part of that M&E process?
Wonderful. And I know you've mentioned some information about funding and how it's important to actually be able to prove your impact so that you can continue getting funds from philanthropists and other funders. But it would be really interesting to also know more information about how you see it helping when actually you are providing this proof that you are actually making this change, especially because you're working with other nonprofit organizations that are getting funds to be able to take part of your services. So how do you think these organizations have benefited from you showing that these programs that you're offering are actually improving well-being?
Excellent. So I suppose where organizations lack that infrastructure to look after monitoring and evaluation at depth or at scale, then working with us makes it seamless and easy. So that makes us more of an attractive organization in that regard too. Furthermore, we produce an impact report after every time we work with a program, beneficiary cohort, or organization. And this will detail what we've done in terms of outputs and quantify those outcomes in many different ways. So in doing so, it helps us evidence to their funders what we're doing, but also makes our process a lot more seamless so they don't have to go back and check and do that work themselves. This, as you can imagine, saves time, effort, energy, money, most importantly to an underfunded organization especially. So this is why it was really, really great here. The other point to this as well, I think, is the fact that we work cross-sector. We work with private, public, and third sector here too. And I think what's really interesting, especially when we have conversations with a lot of private companies, health and well-being, especially in the workplace, is becoming quite a new and fast, hot topic. It has been in the last 5 to 10 years, but definitely picking up a lot more weight as I go to conferences and see these things. What's really interesting there is how they measure health and well-being is far behind how you would measure, say, for example, a financial output or what you do here. So there is great learning from doing the M&E from a third sector background, from a social enterprise background, and then helping other organizations evidence that too. I think whenever we transition someone from a mental well-being case study from someone who is maybe below the national average score on a short Warwick Edinburgh scale, you mentioned one of the tools in your library at the beginning, and then how you can transfer that across, that's phenomenal. That really, really does quantify that effort in such a clear and coherent way that will hopefully show organizations, funders, investors, how great your organization is.
Yeah, that's fascinating to hear. And yeah, it's not just for funds. It's just for you also to know how you can improve your programs, and this is going to bring in, the funds and also investors, regardless of it being nonprofit or for-profit organization. This information is just very crucial, and I think as you said, there's so much more that we can do. There's so much more that we can work on in terms of measuring these soft skills that we're trying to improve for people, or behavioral changes. So talking about your journey, how did you start, like right from the beginning when you founded Tone Alone? How did your impact measurement journey started? Like, maybe you can walk us through, starting Tone Alone and thinking, oh, I need to measure my impact now, or like when was that point when you thought, okay, this is the time where we need to start thinking about our outcome framework, and then starting to think of tools to measure it?
So for me, as I said, I came from the third sector. So working with lots of charities and organizations like that, it was kind of ingrained. So for me, monitoring and evaluation is from day one. And it's really interesting because I know that a lot of organizations, they come out creating this fantastic social impact, but then it's often a thought that happens later. And that's fine. That works really well too, because there's that enthusiasm, that real sort of root energy that helps make that difference completely. But for us, we came from this idea where, okay, what's the difference I want to create? So what's my overall aim and objective here? What are the outcomes that look like that? And then what are the indicators for the outcomes? And then we went through that process, which is something, again, that Socialsuite, when we started working with you, you provided a fantastic framework, which almost helped me audit that process in another way. So that was really, really helpful in that regard. But definitely it's something that we keep coming back to year on year. We have a trainers meeting every 8 weeks that just goes through these outcomes, goes through course frameworks, and make sure that we audit that process. So that's really important, this auditing that goes on year to make sure that we are recording what we need to record. The other thing I think is, when we started from day one, we talk about, this is back in 2014-15, it was me riding around on a motorbike with another couple of trainers and other people, with sheets of paper, trying to just ask beneficiaries, how would you score this out of 10, or what are your attitudes to this? And then trying to catch them at the end as well in that last session when they've got the endorphins from exercise or whatever session we've ran, whatever workshop we've done. And that was great. But again, papers get lost. Outcomes can be sometimes harder to track. And having everyone singing from that same hymn sheet is very, very important. I remember having one trainer especially who decided to create his own monitoring framework, which was fantastic, and obviously really well aligned with what I was trying to achieve with the company. Needless to say, there was lots of internal conversations, and it has evolved. But this is pretty much our journey at the moment. There's been lots of nuance in between, but at the moment we're dealing with projects at scale and hopefully catching the same data sets across the board.
Yeah, it's beautiful to hear that you have had that awareness right from the beginning of Tone Alone, and I believe this is one of the main things that is helping Tone Alone become really successful. It's because you know what you're doing and why you're doing it, and right from the beginning you started working through that, and also because this is exactly what we recommend to a lot of the organizations that we work with. It's an ongoing process, continuing to measure that impact, continuing to go back to your outcome framework every year and thinking about, oh, okay, how am I doing now? Is it something that I still want to work on, or do I want to make some changes on my outcomes based on the results that I have been achieving? So that's ideal to hear. And talking about the tools, so you thought about measuring your outcomes, and then you started working with different trainers, and some of them created their own M&E system, not necessarily system, but like created their own probably outcomes for these programs. But thinking about you trying to systemize this a little more, and thinking about the right tools that you want to use to help you actually be able to measure your well-being. How was that process in terms of searching for the right tools, as well as finding the tools that can help you actually measure that well-being?
That was an interesting journey, because we were already exposed to things like the short growth Edinburgh scale, which I definitely think for a population health model where it comes to mental well-being is very, very strong. It also has a background with NHS Scotland, who came up with it, and therefore we're able to give a national average for different client groups. So that really does help us at least give some picture to where beneficiaries fall on that spectrum. So I was quite a big fan of that one beforehand. As we've evolved and looked at other tools as well, we've looked at Qual, we've looked at Who5, we looked at other sort of measurement techniques too. And in doing so, we found that they can be quite broad. They don't necessarily dial in the outcomes we have. And where you have a beneficiary, especially coming from a marginalized client group that might not have the patience, the time, the energy to fill out forms upon forms, because quite frankly, their life probably revolves around forms. We work with a lot of unpaid carers that have to go through carers assessments and fill out completely so many different forms throughout their lifetime, that it's probably the last thing you want to do is sit down and give them 14, 15, 20 different questions that they don't have the time to do. So the idea is to create really, really short, sharp tools. So when we had to look for all the tools we want, we need something that's quite succinct, something that's going to fit into our framework as well. So things like the short work are very, very strong for us. The 3-item loneliness scale, I'm quite a big fan of as well. Again, 3 questions, score out of 9, nice and quick. And then we also have our own project outcomes. And this is really important because we measure behavior change for a lot of our programs. We do this because that's where the sustainability lies. So if someone takes part in a social intervention, we want to know that our outcomes are going to keep happening. We want to know that come 6 months down the line that someone's still going to be using some of the tools we provided through our accredited wellbeing courses or what have you. So in doing so, we had to put in our own techniques as well. And we put in our own sort of outcome frameworks, and then quantitatively would have to score them against something too. So that's where we came through. And then of course, if you're running a course over a period of time or a webinar or something, and you want feedback from a beneficiary, we also have to factor that into the number count of questions. So if we've done a course, for example, and we want to get the feedback about satisfaction, that's obviously going to increase the number of questions on that monitoring evaluation form post-course. So just being mindful about how many questions we're loading up is really, really important there for us. So in terms of the tools, short questions, really quantifiable, easily done at scale, and then has space for our own metrics that we want to put in, whether it be attitudes towards eating or how you're able to deal with stressful situations.
I believe this is very useful to a lot of the people that are joining here. Well summarized, and I think a lot of organizations are still looking into what are the tools that can work for us, but at the same time, not one tool would work for everyone. So I love that the summary that you provided is really very general, so it would allow some organizations to look for the right tools that could work for them. Thank you for that. So now you've decided on the tools that you want to use, and you've given us, some sort of a background on using other solutions before the use of Socialsuite. But it would be great if you can tell us a little more in terms of, the use of technology to help you measure impact, especially because you're trying to measure impact over time. So how did you decide on a solution? At first, you said you used other tools, including, for example, SurveyMonkey. So what were the other tools maybe that you've used? What made you decide to use the previous tools, and what made you decide to use Socialsuite? And what were the things that you actually were looking to in terms of technology to help you measure your impact?
I'm sure like many organizations, it's pretty similar in the sense that the pandemic sped up a lot of the requirement to scale and to need things. It needed far more robust maybe systems in place as well. And especially where we started to shift our market. So we were primarily third sector facing, and although cultivating fantastic relationships to hopefully cross-subsidize some of the projects there from our private work, so taking the money from working with big institutions, big corporations, and channeling it back into great causes, we needed to shift what we did. We need to focus more amongst commercial markets. So in doing so, sending out SurveyMonkey link, although it was all well and good, we needed something a bit more robust, something we could do at scale as well. We also needed a form of registration. So we also need to count registrations and build that into courses and count how many beneficiaries we're affecting at time. As with most organizations, especially third sector, you want to know how many people you're affecting over the course of a year. So I could tell us by the end of January 2021, we already had over 1,000 registrations on our platform, which is phenomenal, because then you have the scale of how much you're affecting those lives and what's happening as well, how many touch points you're creating too. So that was really beneficial for us. We also wanted to work with an experienced provider who could also support us through this. We have such a small technology team. We have less than 10 employees in our team as it is. And although that might be seen as a hindrance, it's also a great benefit because it means we're adaptable and the knowledge in our team is fantastic. It's very concentrated. So when we think about that, we needed also someone who's going to help shepherd that transition across without having a huge IT team, without having to learn a huge platform from scratch. We also need to work with someone who could also help us get the outcomes we needed. So that was really, really, really important to us. I must admit, though, in the first month I took on Socialsuite, I did feel a little bit overwhelmed. Goodness me, what have I just done? But fortunately, your team was at hand to give me patient talks and to calm me down. So I think that was really, really beneficial there. So in terms of solution then, why we chose or why we went through Socialsuite, why we decided upon the solution that we do, we needed a CRM that could handle the data. We needed to look after the registration process and count every beneficiary because every person counts. And then the other thing is we needed someone who's going to help shepherd that change and help us integrate that system really, really well into what we do. So there are our main ones in deciding a solution. And it's so much better than having buying in a product. You're buying in something that's going to hopefully look after you.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing this information. And we're going to visualize this also in a bit for us to see how you are able to actually see for each beneficiary or for each cohort and for the courses that you are looking into, how this is actually showing in terms of what is the change that you're making and what are the indicators that have helped you see that you actually were able to make the change. But before that, thinking about all this process, and I know you've been with Socialsuite for about a year now and you already have your dashboard. So thinking about how this has helped you transform this data into an opportunity and also future opportunities, future potential opportunities that you think you will be getting because now you have this robust system that is allowing you to see all the information that you need in real time and visualize it and actually easily prove your impact. Can you tell us a little more about your thoughts in terms of the opportunities that this could?
Indeed. I believe you're about to show us the dashboard in a second of mock data, not our actual real data there. But this really helps us capture outcomes and visually represent those outcomes really quickly. So again, they can be turned into infographics for us. At DTA, I talked to my team about this to death, I think. I have what's called the rule of 5. So whatever one thing you do can be done 4 or 5 different ways. It doesn't just have to be a training video. It could also be a promotion video. It doesn't just have to be a training video or a promotion video. It could also be a social media post. We also have an internal community in which we can share things with. We can also use it as in-house training. There's lots of different applications. With statistics and the way we create impact, again, those infographics are not only really, really useful to know that where we are in terms of temperature check, to help funders, to help other organizations. They also help us with auditing our programs. They also help us create infographics for social media, for whatever you have. In fact, if you go on our social media page, especially Instagram, you'll be able to see quite a few of what we're doing there. So that's one really, really important opportunity that comes from this rule of 5 that we have here. We're also a member of Social Value UK, and Social Value is something that's really, really taking off in the UK. And it forms from the background, I believe it has roots in Sustainable Development Goals, SDG. So this is obviously a global priority for many people. On our board of directors sits a member of the World Health Organization who makes sure we're orientated to at least working towards SDG 3. So what this means is that we have this agenda to reduce health inequalities. There's so much there. So we're able to see which communities we're affecting and how that's happening there, but it also helps us represent that at scale. So where corporate companies are looking from CSR, so corporate social responsibility, into ESG frameworks, this is really, really important that we can fulfill that that social criteria there. So that's really important there. So it opens us to new markets, other markets too. And again, with that social value, that's another market too. So this is around especially construction, especially organizations there that are looking to whenever they build or do something in a neighborhood or an area, how else am I going to affect those population groups? What else am I going to do here? So in terms of social value, that's very, very important. The other thing I think that's really, really good about this is that social return on investment is becoming quite a big buzzword. It has been for a while, but it's definitely picking up. And there's lots of different tools out there in which you can generate that social value, that social return on investment. For us, though, it helps us build in that as well too. So if an organization wants us to turn around after a year's project or 6-month project and say, okay, so what's the social return on investment here? We're able to actually calculate that quite easily by asking a few questions and then dialing into maybe focus groups or going in for more of that qualitative work as well as that quantitative work that the surveys do. So in terms of opportunities, there's huge opportunities here. We have those infographics, we have these marketing resources, we have these sales resources. In fact, one of the last sales communications our company puts out was actually case studies and infographics. That was really, really useful. But also it helps us scale what we're doing and enter into new market areas, which is also phenomenal. Funding is obviously quite a huge concern for the third sector quite a lot, but it also helps to evidence those outcomes in such a huge way. In fact, I was at a conference for one of the national charities that we work very closely with in the UK only a month ago. And in there, they've just developed a social value calculator, which they have handed out all to their network partners, which they will be using to calculate this. So the fact that we can do this ahead of the game is also really, really helpful. And again, makes us attractive to work with those third sector partners again.
Wow, that is really wonderful to hear. And I'm so glad that this is helping you in different ways. Now we'll very quickly look into a mock dashboard that we have for Tone Alone. And maybe you can also tell us a little more about the program while we're looking into the dashboard. So for people to understand what you're trying to measure for this program.
Definitely. So it's worth just reiterating here that this is more data. We would not want to share any data with any of our clients at all, even if it isn't anonymized. So this dashboard here is for one of our accredited wellbeing courses. We make sure that our courses are accredited, so they hold a lot of weight and that people walk away with some form of certification. In terms of the registration for the courses, we as a social enterprise want to know how many people are unpaid carers. This helps us signpost and direct people to the organizations they need, but it also makes us hyper aware of what their sensitivity issues are when they come in. So if anyone's working with any marginalized population groups, this is really important because it helps provide context. If anyone has been a carer or has been in any form of unpaid caring role, you'll know that the emotional side of things is quite heavy, that it can definitely lead to a higher incidence of maybe poverty, ill health, physical and mental, as well as many other things. So it's really important that we screen our beneficiaries really well. We know how many unpaid carers we're affecting change with. So caring status is one of the criteria we put on our registration forms. It's also worth saying on caring status as well that there's many people who are unsure if they're a carer. So by highlighting this, there's also an education piece we can find out too and highlight that. In terms of long-term conditions and disabilities, so our organization has specialist health trainers that work with special long-term conditions. So if someone has COPD, asthma, maybe they have a metabolic condition such as type 2 diabetes, we can screen that at the beginning and find out. So this also helps with the health and safety of our courses, as well as help evidence how well we're doing that theory of change. In fact, one of the questions on this form that generates this dashboard is to ask how many people are medicating and how many people are not medicating. And that's with the view to hopefully get people to self-manage their conditions rather than be dependent on medication. Now, some people need medication, don't get me wrong here, 100%. But if, for example, if you're pre-diabetic and you can manage to get exercise or eat well, you're likely to not become pre-diabetic. You're likely to shift back into better blood glucose levels. So that's really, really important that we screen that, and it helps our theory of change. And finally, ethnicity is also on here too. So it's obviously very important that we have a wide demographic in terms of who we're serving. We can also identify gender as well, but in terms of demographics such as this, it's really important to know how we're affecting the populations we work with. We obviously want to make sure we're working with marginalized clients who struggle to access mainstream health and fitness, and therefore it's really important to get that wide-reaching source of that data. It's worth also saying I had a conversation with Socialsuite this morning, and we're also going to get geolocation put on there too. So we get to find out where our beneficiaries lie and where we're actually helping them, which is also very, very important for, say, for example, our social investor who concentrates mainly in London. So attendance is useful. We can track attendance, how many people are coming to courses, and that's really, really helpful to see who drops off, who doesn't, who engages, who doesn't. But this does require us to make sure we maintain those dashboards and maintain those surveys really, really well. So that's also extremely useful and something that other platforms don't provide. In terms of the questions, in terms of the framework that we have here, well, number of beneficiaries who are able to engage in these questionnaires are very, very important. And your pre and post numbers are going to be important to make sure this balances well. But typically there's a threshold to which we measure here. So we usually have 4-item scale from strongly agree, disagree to strongly disagree, and we pose them a question. And here we can see that the amount of people who meet the threshold post-stage as opposed to pre-stage is significantly higher. Again, this is mock data, so this is not necessarily what's happened in the programs. But again, we can also see who's increased and decreased in those questionnaires through that secondary measure on the right-hand side of those questions. And then as we go down, we're able to see how the loneliness score works. So these metrics that are in those dashboards already built. So things like mental well-being and loneliness scores are just taken from Socialsuite's library, and we're able to see the effect of that change there. So we can see that pre-stage people are scoring quite high on loneliness, whereas post-stage that score has come completely down. So we know here that they are being well looked after. One of the things that Don't Tone Alone, you can probably imagine from the name, is this idea where we foster a sense of community, that you're not alone. If you're going through a journey of change or you're in your well-being and you don't really know what to do, you can be part of that community. So again, when you think about finding the right tools, it's really measured and really mirrored what our ethos was as a company. So that was really, really important there. Beneficiary feedback is obviously really, really useful. So we have how do people rate the course? Are they happy with it? And obviously course satisfaction. So this helps us do a bit of learning here. Now, on the top of this dashboard as well, there's also a feedback tool. So we get to see that qualitative data as well as the quantitative data. Just by clicking there, we can see down, for example, some of the comments that people might give from a course. And that's really, really useful, again, just to give further context. And as I said, provide that learning. So it's not just that one course doing the one thing, but that audit process that goes through every 8 weeks with our courses, with our trainers to say, okay, so where's the learning? What can we do better? And how does this actually create those outcomes for the beneficiaries? Could it be that we've done a mental wellbeing course, but they didn't find the course useful? They found that sense of community useful. Okay, what can we do around that? How can we foster that sense of community? How can we improve that course content? I'll be glad to say, though, that everyone loves the course, so it's absolutely fine.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. And as everyone might have noticed, this is all showing based on the outcomes and the indicators that that Don't Tone Alone has for this course, which is very useful, and really being able to filter based on the caring status and any other filters that you may need is really important. So now, thank you so much again, Chris, for this. Really, really helpful. Now that we are by the end of this session, I just wanted to share with everyone this link, which would allow you all to see where you're at currently in your measurement. So you can just in your impact measurement stage, so you can just copy, so you can just take a photo of this, and I'm gonna share the link with you right now. 1 second. So if you want to fill out this survey, we will share with you some information about where you're at currently at your impact measurement, and we will share with you other details about the work that other organizations are not to work with, the impact measurement journey that other organizations are at that are working in a similar sector. So as you might have seen, within Socialsuite, you can measure your impact, but to be able to measure your impact, you need to have your outcome framework ready, and therefore we meet our customers where they're at. So we provide this impact assessment, which we have provided you to date for this session. And then based on that, we work with our customers and see how we can start measuring impact through the use of Socialsuite based on their outcome framework. So we help you throughout the process. So depending on what stage you're at, we help you on building your outcomes and indicators, and then throughout the data collection strategy, creating that data collection strategy, and finally building these questions that are built based on your outcomes and indicators. And then utilizing the platform, being able to then starting to collect data through the use of Socialsuite and continuing to be able to see this in real time in your dashboard and continuing to report on that. So if you'd like to learn more information about Socialsuite, please feel free, or if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Tom, my colleague, who is going to be able to respond to any questions you might have. In terms of our support, here is his email, and I'm sharing now his Calendly as well. But we're going to also send you an email with this recording, as well as with your assessment results when you fill out the survey. Finally, I just want to share with you these polls to know what you would be interested in terms of future webinars. And would love to see what you think about this webinar, what your thoughts are on this webinar as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat box before we end this. Okay, it doesn't seem like we have any questions. Okay, great. So I'll just end with this quote from Ian from YMCA. You can invest 100% of your money on your programs, but not know what's the impact that they have. But you can invest 90% on your programs and spend 10% measuring and evaluating and prove your impact. Thank you all, and thank you again, Chris, for this great session, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.